The Singing Drum. Once upon a time, there was a boy called Audie-Lola. His parents loved him dearly because he was their only child, and they made sure he lacked nothing. They treated him like a delicate egg and would not allow anyone to reprimand him, even when he behaved very badly. Because of this, Audie-Lola grew to be a selfish, spoilt child who found it difficult to obey instructions. One day, during the rainy season, Audie-Lola, who was about 10 years old at the time, told his mother that he was going outside to play with his friends. "Stay in the neighborhood and do not wander off into the valley. The sky is heralding rain," warned his mother. But, as usual, Audie-Lola ignored his mother's advice and ran off to find his friends. "Let's go and look for honey in the beehive in Oyen Valley," Audie-Lola said to his friends once they had gathered together on the edge of the village. The boys agreed, and so they all set off on the 4-mile journey in search of honey. But as the boys approached Oyen, they noticed that the sky was beginning to turn gray. The first thunderclap made Audie-Lola's friends panic. One boy stepped forward and said, "We should get back to our homes before the rain comes." This was sensible advice, and all of the other boys agreed to return home immediately. "Not me," yelled Audie-Lola. "I have come here to find honey, and I will not leave until I find some." "But how can you find honey in the rain?" asked another of the boys. "If I cannot find honey in the rain," said Audie-Lola, "then I will stay right here until it stops raining." And just as the words left his lips, tiny drops of rain began to fall from the sky and tickle his bare back. Upon seeing the rain, the other boys all scampered off in the direction of the village, leaving Audie-Lola to hunt for the honey alone. Before long, the little drops of rain formed a puddle, and Audie-Lola decided to jump around in it, splashing and dancing and waving his arms. Some of the farmers returning from the field saw Audie-Lola dancing in the puddle and told him to go home. But the spoilt boy would not listen. Instead, he wrinkled up his nose and stuck out his tongue and continued to dance in the puddle as the rain grew heavier and heavier. Before long, the sky began to empty its contents in sheets and buckets, and the heavy downpour flooded the entire valley in no time at all. Audie-Lola could not find a place to hide anywhere. He looked all around until, eventually, he saw an Odin tree and hurried towards it. But just as he was about to climb up into the tree, he slipped and fell into the water, and the floods quickly engulfed him. As the waters carried Audie-Lola down through the valley towards the big river, he began to scream and howl in fear for his life, but there was nobody around to hear the frightened boy. He tried to reach out and grab a hold of anything that might keep him afloat, twigs, logs, poles, but it was no use. He could not get a proper grip as he was moving too fast. Then he saw a house in the distance and decided to scream at the top of his voice in the hopes that he would gain the attention of those inside. "Help!" cried out Audie-Lola. "Please help me." Iajapa, the tortoise, heard the noise and opened his window to see what was happening. He was shocked to see a boy struggling to swim against the flood, so he hurried out of his house to help. The tortoise took a long pole from the shed in his front yard and stretched it out across the water towards the boy. "Quick, grab a hold," yelled Japa. Audie-Lola reached out for the pole and grabbed it with both hands and held on tightly as Ajapa pulled him to safety. As soon as the boy was out of the water, Ajapa brought him into the house and built a fire and served soup so as to stave off the cold. But Ajapa was not generous by nature, and he was all the time busy deciding what he might gain from the unsuspecting boy. This question was quickly answered after Audie-Lola had drained his bowl of soup and curled up on a mat in a corner of the room. Before the boy drifted off to sleep, he began to sing in the most beautiful voice Ajapa had ever heard. It was a lullaby that his mother used to sing to him when he was a little boy. "Omo o, Inpe Dagba, Omo o, Inpe Dagba." kakir jajolo mob temi, omo o, inpe dagba, bomo mi dagba, esori ire, omo o, inpe dagba, bomo mi dagba adiolola o, omo o, inpe dagba, omo o, inpe dagba, omo o, inpe dagba, kakir jajolo mob temi, omo o, inpe dagba. Ijapa was mesmerized by the song, and as he swayed to the enchanting rhythm a mischievous plan came into his head, and he knew then how he might make use of his guest. The tortoise waited until the boy was fast asleep. Then he crept out of the house to his backyard, where he began to carve a big wooden drum. He worked throughout the night until his task was complete, and when Adilola awoke the next morning, Ijapa asked the boy to hop inside of the drum. "Why do you want me to get inside of the drum?" asked Adilola. The tortoise smiled innocently and told the boy that he simply wanted to test the drum's sound. "It is not such a huge favor to ask, given that I saved you from the floods, is it?" Adilola had to agree that he owed the tortoise a great debt for saving his life, and so the boy climbed inside the drum and the tortoise covered it over with stretched hide. Once Adilola was hidden inside, Ijapa instructed the boy to sing the song Omo o, inpe dagba each time he hits the drum with a stick. Adilola's parents had been waiting anxiously for their son to return home. The boy had been gone all night and his mother was beside herself with worry. After the flood water had subsided, both parents went into the valley in search of their son, but they could not find him anywhere. Eventually they went to the palace to report Adilola missing. When the king heard the distressing news, he sent his servants to search the entire village and its environs. They too could not find the boy, and eventually the search was abandoned. Ijapa was unaware of all this commotion as he stood in the village square and shouted out to passers-by, "Come and listen to my singing drum. It is truly the most beautiful thing you will ever hear." Many people gathered to witness this spectacle, and each time the tortoise banged on the drum with his stick, Adilola would sing from within. All those who listened were enthralled by his beautiful voice. Many were so captivated by the singing drum that they threw their caps and headgear to the floor and danced until they could dance no more. Nobody could see the boy trapped inside. They all thought that it was a magical drum, and so they gave the crafty tortoise a great deal of money for such entertainment. Word soon spread throughout the entire neighborhood, and everyone came to see Ijapa and his singing drum. The following day, Ijapa was ordered to the palace as the king was also very eager to listen to the magical singing drum. Ijapa was pleasantly surprised to see many people in the palace courtyard. The king had invited the entire village for the great entertainment, and there was not a single space left where one might sit. The tortoise gained a great deal of confidence from the crowd and insisted that he be paid in gold before he played his drum. The king had never heard of such a thing, but as he was so anxious to hear the drum, he handed over a bag of gold and commanded the tortoise to begin. Beaming with relish, Ijapa quickly banged on his drum, and again the beautiful voice began to sing the song Omo o, inpe dagba. The king, the chiefs, and all the people in the palace courtyard immediately got up to dance. Despite such merriment and dancing, the king could not help but notice Adilola's mother. The woman was sitting in a corner crying uncontrollably while her husband tried in vain to console her. The king stopped the entertainment immediately and ordered Adilola's parents to be brought before him. He was furious because it was taboo for anyone to cry in the presence of a monarch. Adilola's mother bowed before the king and told him that Ijapa's drum was not magical at all. It was her son who was singing inside of it, she was sure. No mother, she said, could bear the thought of her only son being held prisoner in such a manner. The king commanded his guards to tear off the hide from the top of the drum so that they might all see what was inside. When the hide was finally removed, Adilola stepped slowly out of the drum, blinking against the bright sun but grateful to be free at last. When the boy saw his parents, he ran to hug them both with tears of joy in his eyes. The entire palace erupted into a terrible commotion, as many people were shocked that Ljapa would deceive them in such a way. The king ordered his guards to lock Ljapa up in jail, but the crafty tortoise was quick to point out to the king that the flood would have killed the boy if he had not rescued him from the waters by pulling him to safety. The king thought long and hard about Ljapa's defense and eventually decided to set the tortoise free. But the wise king warned against such tricks in the future, and he also took back his bag of gold for good measure. As for Adilola, he decided that it was wiser to listen to his mother more often and not behave like such a spoilt child. As a result of this lesson, the boy grew up to become an intelligent and gentle man. The love of the forest. The sun rises above the Amazon rainforest, and the huge, evergreen trees allow rays of light to pass between their leaves and paint the forest floor in dappled shadows. In one of the taller trees, little monkey Dora is waking up. Dora is a pretty little monkey with brown hair and a long tail. She wishes that she could sleep some more, but there is no time to lose. Today is the day of the big party. Monkeys will come from far and wide to attend the party, even from neighboring countries such as Peru and Bolivia. The big party, held in the Brazilian part of the Amazon rainforest, is always a very big success. There is music and dancing, and often a monkey will find a mate and fall in love. Dora is very excited because this year she has been asked to help the older monkeys of the community with the organizing of the party. This is a very great responsibility, and there is no time to lose. Dora arrives at the meeting early and is very pleased to see her friend Tinga. Tinga is an indigenous name meaning of white color. This is the perfect name for Dora's friend, as he has white hair and green eyes. Tinga is a very rare and shy monkey, but when he sees Dora his eyes light up with joy. The other monkeys often laugh at Tinga's strange white hair and green eyes, but Dora does not like such jokes. She thinks that her friend is very handsome, even though her heart belongs to another monkey called Paco. Paco is a big, strong monkey with thick, black hair who lives in the forest on the very edge of Bolivia. Dora first met Paco at the big party the previous year. They danced together only once, but Dora knew then that her heart belonged to him. She also remembers that Paco was arrogant, and that he did not pay her very much attention. He had said that Dora was too young, and that she was always lost in her own fantasy world. Despite all of this, Dora is looking forward to seeing Paco again, and such thoughts make her even more excited about the party. Chief Ubarajara, a very big and very brave monkey, calls the meeting to order and begins to hand out tasks to the assembled monkeys. Eventually, it is Dora's turn to be given her special task for the day, but the little monkey is so lost in her own thoughts that she does not hear Chief Ubarajara's instructions. Dora. Dora. Have you been listening to a word I have said to you? You are always lost in your fantasy world, even today when there is so much work to be done. Dora is startled and stammers her reply. I am very sorry, Chief Ubarajara. Could you please repeat what it is you would like me to do today? Chief Ubarajara is a little impatient with young Dora, but he understands that she is still young and that she is also very excited about the party. You must find for us the most beautiful and delicious cupuaçu and acai berries and the finest Brazil nuts for our feast tonight. Chief Ubarajara claps his hands and smiles at the eager faces gathered in the forest clearing. Now that everyone knows what to do, let's get to work. And so the monkeys part company. each one determined to fulfill their task in preparation for the big party. Dora very much likes the idea of being in charge of finding the food for the feast. She loves to explore the forest, jumping from branch to branch between the tall trees. She also loves to look at the beautiful plants and rich wildlife that fill her beloved forest. I am the best person to choose for a job such as this, thinks Dora, as she sets off on her journey, determined to climb the tallest trees in order to find the most purple assise and sweetest cupucus. After many hours of hard work, Dora's bag is filled with a rich bounty of fruits and nuts. She thinks how proud Chief Ubrajara will be when he sees what a good job she has done. This thought makes the little monkey very happy as she hoists the bag onto her shoulders and heads for home. When Dora is halfway home, her thoughts are interrupted by a strange sound in the forest. She looks all about her, but does not see anything unusual. She tells herself to take extra care, but before long her thoughts drift again to the coming party and the dancing and celebrating that will be had by all. She thinks about how she will tidy her hair, and what she will say when she sees Paco. I wonder if he will still think that I am too young. Even so, he will surely be impressed by the beautiful fruits and nuts I have gathered for the feast. Dora's thoughts are interrupted again when she notices a rich, juicy kupwaku on the forest floor in front of her. How lucky to find a beautiful fruit such as this, she thinks, and runs to pick up the kupwaku and add it to her bag. But as soon as Dora's hand reaches out towards the fruit, a huge net pulls tight around her body and hoists the little monkey up into the air. Dora knows about such traps and is very scared. She cries out for help, but the birds of the forest do not seem interested in her suffering. She struggles to free herself from the heavy netting, but it is no use at all. Help! Help me, cries Dora. But there are no animals around to help, and she is unable to wriggle free of the heavy netting by herself. A great sadness descends upon Dora. Her strength leaves her and she is unable to struggle any longer. She does not understand why humans set such traps to capture the monkeys of the forest. Her eyes fill with tears at the thought of being dragged away from her home, of never again jumping from branch to branch among the ancient trees, or of experiencing the great rainstorms. We do not do the humans any harm, she thinks. We enjoy the forest and only wish to be free. I love this forest so much, and I would not know how to live if I were taken away from all of this rich life, all the beautiful fruits that grow in the trees and the fresh water that runs in the river. How will I survive if they take me away from my friend Tinga? Dora hears a sound coming from the trees at the edge of the clearing. Human voices. They are coming towards her. This is the end, she thinks. I cannot escape. As the voices get closer and closer, Dora thinks about how much she loves her forest, how much she has always loved her forest. Suddenly a wind whips up from the forest floor, a spinning whirlwind that heads straight for the humans. Dora can hear laughter in the air. Then a small boy appears out of nowhere. The boy has flaming red hair, he has very big ears, and his feet are pointing the wrong way, sticking out behind him as if twisted all the way around. The whirlwind comes to a stop and Dora realizes that this is, in fact, another boy. This boy appears very dark. He has only one leg and wears upon his head a bright red hood. He has a pipe in his mouth and is smiling gaily as if having a wonderful time. Dora cannot believe her eyes. Is it really Kurupra and Saisai come to save me? She thinks. The little monkey had only heard of the two boys in stories told by her ancestors. Their existence belonged in legend, and as such Dora was never sure if the legend was true. At that moment a voice fills Dora's ears. When you love the forest, little one, the forest also loves you. This is the protection that I send to you to keep you safe. Now Dora is sure that what she sees is real, and she is filled with gratitude and love. Seisai begins to spin on his leg once more, creating a great whirlwind all about him. Kurupra arms himself with an ugly face, and together the two head towards the humans, making a terrible noise that would scare any grown man right down to his soul. The humans run from the forest as fast as they can, never once looking back towards Kurupra and Seisai, and they promise all the time that they will never again enter the forest to set their traps. When the humans have gone, Kurupra and Seisai free Dora from her net and make sure that she is not harmed in any way. The little monkey is so grateful that she offers her bag of fruits and nuts as a way of saying thank you to the brave boys of the forest. Kurupra takes the bag with gratitude. He smiles at Dora, saying, "Always take care of the forest, and the forest will always protect you in return." With these words, he walks from the clearing on his backwards feet and disappears among the tall trees. Seisai then turns into a whirlwind once again and spins off into the forest behind his friend. Dora pauses for just a moment before running back in the direction of her home, eager to tell her magical story to the monkeys who are already dancing and celebrating at the big party. When she arrives back home, Dora apologizes to Chief Yubarajara for not bringing her bag of fruit as instructed. She eagerly explains how Kurupra and Seisai saved her from being kidnapped by the humans, and of how she offered the fruit as a thank you for their bravery. Chief Yubarajara nods patiently at young Dora and seems only grateful that she has returned safely. Just then Paco steps out from the crowd that has gathered to hear Dora's amazing story. "You are really a silly monkey, aren't you?" he says, in his proud voice. Only a dreamer such as you could believe in the legend of Kurupra and Seisai. Dora realizes that Paco is actually a big fool. She tells herself that she will have nothing to do with him any longer. "He is too proud and arrogant, and I have been foolish to feel anything for a monkey such as him," she thinks to herself. Then little Dora spots her friend Tingda entering the party from the forest. She runs towards him with a smile. Tingda is very happy to see that his friend is safe. "Where have you been, Dora?" "What happened?" Dora tells Tingda all about her adventure in the forest. She tells about the humans and being caught in the net and meeting the two legends of the forest. Dora also realizes how much she cares for Tingda and remembers how it was him that she thought of the most when she was caught in the net, and how she felt so very sad at the thought of never seeing him again. Tingda and Dora are very happy and reach out and hug one another. "I am so glad that you are safe, Dora, and I am glad to be with you again, Tingda," the little monkey says as she takes him by the hand and leads him onto the dance floor. The party fills with music and laughter. The sun goes down and the stars fill the night sky above the ancient rainforest. Dora and Tingda dance together all night long, happy to be with one another, happy to be at the big party in the forest. Out of the corner of her eye, Dora is sure she sees a whirlwind and a boy with flame-red hair running between the trees in the forest. She is grateful to be surrounded by her friends and by the beautiful forest she calls home. The farmer and the cow. Once upon a time, there was a farmer called Anyo. Anyo was not a rich farmer, but he was very happy. He worked in the fields with his only cow from dawn until dusk. This provided Anyo with vegetables to eat and extra crops, which he would sell to the local villagers on market day so that he might buy other foods. Anyo and his cow worked very hard, but they were contented with their simple life and they did not complain as they had everything they needed. But one year, everything changed. The rains did not come and the farmland began to dry up and turn to dust. Because there was no rain, the crops did not grow and Anyo had nothing to sell to the villagers, and therefore no money to buy food. The poor farmer became very hungry and was forced to sell everything he had inside of his little house in exchange for food so that he could feed himself and his beloved cow. Anyo hoped for the rains to come so that he might return to the fields and resume work. Several months passed and there was still no rain. The crops did not grow in Anyo and his cow grew more and more hungry. There was nothing left to sell and so there was no food to eat. Eventually, Anyo could bear the hunger no longer. The farmer turned to his cow and said, "I am very sorry, but I am afraid that I might have to eat you." The cow looked at Anyo and tears started to roll down from its wide eyes. When Anyo saw the tears he became very upset and felt such guilt that he had even suggested eating his faithful cow. He threw his arms around the cow and said to him, "I am so sorry. I will never suggest such a thing again. Will you please forgive me?" The cow nodded his head and was very relieved not to be eaten. Suddenly it began to rain and the lands turned from dust to rich soil. The crops began to grow and it was not long before Anyo and his faithful cow were back in the fields once more. When harvest time came around, Anyo and his cow were very busy and worked from dawn until dusk in the fields. They had more crops than ever before and Anyo and his cow were happy again. They gathered the crops and went into the village where they sold their produce to the people gathered in the market. This gave them money to buy food so that they were no longer hungry. From that day on, Anyo promised that he would never eat beef because his cow was sacred and provided him with milk and helped him work in the fields to provide crops to be eaten and sold for money. A confused mind. The word confusion sometimes makes you spin your head and lose everything. Sometimes it brings you a new idea and gets you on right path. As I grow older, I have more and more responsibilities and obligations to myself and my dear ones. Basically, I have had a very simple family background that they, my parents, themselves are struggling for their day-to-day life happening. As I talk to my parents, I get to know that they are still not in a good financial status. One of the major reasons why I was sent to India was just to relieve their financial burden and extra belly in a family with limited means of livelihood. Honestly, sometimes I feel that I am nowhere fit in this world. I am like a good guy that lost in a crowd with, oh yes, I think that I remember that guy, but even though I go to work regularly reading a lots about business and idea, a part of me is like where I am now. Obviously a guy getting close to 30 years old needs to have a decent job and a woman of his taste. Here I am like parachute hanging on the tree. My close and dear ones are worried about my future and a woman that partner with me. They try to hook me up with a desi gal in abroad, so that I have more comfortable life rather than working hard in India with little here and there. However, I am still like I don't know about marriage and need some more times to think. It's odd times for me. Hopefully that confused mind won't drain my energy and loose temper. Our beliefs totally depend on our everyday attitude. Reading and writing stuffs may help me to get on celebration. Health is wealth. Once upon a time, there was a king who was very lazy. He did not like to do anything. He waited for his attendants to serve him every moment. He used to lie on his bed always. A time came when he really became inactive, only eating good food, and its sleeping made him fatty. So fat he became that he could not move around by himself. He felt sick. Doctors were called in to treat him. Nothing could help him to become fit and fine. The king was a kind-hearted and cordial person. All his subjects were sorry to learn about the fact that their king was not well. One day the minister met a holy man, Sadhu, on the outskirts of the city. While conversing with each other, the sadhu came to know the fact that the king was unwell. He told the minister that he could cure the king. Hearing this, the minister's face brightened. He arranged immediately for a meeting of the sadhu and the king. The sadhu saw the depressed king for a while and then spoke nothing serious had happened and that the king would be all right. From the next day, the treatment would start. He asked the king to come to his hut, which was at a distance from the palace. The king had to come on foot to the hut. The king agreed. After so many years, the king came outside to walk on the road. His ministers and attendants accompanied him. By the time he reached the sadhu's hut, he was breathless, sweating and uncomfortable. The sadhu came out of the hut noticing everything. He offered cool water to the king. The king felt better. The sadhu brought out an iron ball, the size of a football, and gave it to the attendants, asking His Majesty that daily morning and evening he had to roll that ball in the palace grounds. The king okayed to the sadhu and left. After 15 days, when the sadhu came to the palace to meet the king, he had lost a considerable amount of weight, was feeling much better and was active. All his sickness had disappeared. In spite of a lot of wealth, the king was not happy as he was unhealthy, so the moral is health is wealth. How the tortoise got his crooked shell. A long time ago, a terrible famine hit an ancient animal kingdom. It had not rained for 2 whole years and all of the crops were dying. The animals hoped and prayed for an end to the terrible drought, but the sky was no longer able to gather enough clouds, and the rains did not come. Ijapa, the cunning tortoise, lived on the outskirts of the village with his wife and 2 sons. The famine was very bad and was already having a devastating effect on all the animals, so Ijapa could no longer trick them into parting with what little rations of food they possessed. One morning, very tired and hungry, Ijapa left his house with the intention of searching the marketplace for scraps of food. But there was no food in the market, and so the tortoise remained as hungry as ever. However, just as the tortoise was about to return home, he saw Ihoro, the rabbit, hopping towards the marketplace. There was something strange about Ihoro. He looked radiant, well-fed, and full of exuberance. Ijapa was curious. "Why is Ihoro looking so well and I am so hungry?" he thought. So he approached the rabbit with his head bowed as if he were in mourning. Then he began to cry. When Ihoro saw Ijapa, he rushed to meet him. "What is it, my friend?" asked the kindly rabbit. Ijapa answered, "My father is ill in hospital. My wife is expecting our 3rd child, but she is so hungry that I fear for her health. And only last night I heard that my mother-in-law is dying of starvation because she does not have enough food to eat. I feel terrible because there is nothing I can do." Ihoro was suspicious because it was well known that the tortoise was very sly and could not always be trusted. But Ijapa was an excellent performer and soon won the rabbit's sympathy. "Meet me at or brook after dark," said Ihoro. "I will help you in spite of my doubts. I just hope that I do not regret this." Soon it was night, and Ijapa set out into the darkness to find Ihoro waiting at the brook. Once they had said their hellos, both animals made their way into the deep forest, the rabbit leading the way while the tortoise followed closely behind. Before long, they came to a narrow path that led to an open clearing among the trees in the middle of the forest. The rabbit stopped and pulled the tortoise to his side. "What you are about to see must be kept a secret. Do you understand?" The tortoise nodded in agreement, and the rabbit cupped his hands around his mouth and began to sing Aya, Aya Tekuan Whale O, chorus, Alu Jan Jan Ki Jan, Aya, Aya Tekuan Whale O, chorus, Alu Jan Jan Ki Jan. Suddenly, a long, white rope descended from the sky. Ihoro grabbed the rope and began to climb. After hesitating for just a moment, Ijapa also took a hold of the rope and followed the rabbit up into the night sky. The rabbit and the tortoise climbed and climbed until they got to the very top of the rope, where there was a magnificent, fluffy cloud shaped like a door. The door opened, and there stood a kindly old rabbit with a smile upon her face. "Mother," exclaimed Ihoro in a joyful voice as he embraced the old rabbit. "This is my friend Ijapa, who has come for supper." Ihoro's mother held out her hand and gave the tortoise a warm handshake. "Come in and eat with us. I have just set the table." The sight that met Ijapa's eyes made him gasp. There was a large table laden with the most sumptuous foods he had ever seen. There were exotic fruits and fresh fish of all types marinated and cooked with herbs. There was also rice and yam and mouth-watering soups. The hungry tortoise dug in immediately and ate everything that he could get his hands on. "Don't eat too much," Ihoro cautioned, "or you will not be able to climb back down the rope and walk back to the village." The tortoise continued to eat until eventually he slumped back in his chair and gazed sheepishly around the room, his belly protruding like a huge balloon. After they had rested for a while, Ihoro decided that it was time to return home. Ijapa rubbed his large belly, got to his feet very slowly, and made his way to the door. "Aren't you going to take some food back home for your family?" Ihoro's mother asked Ijapa. "No thank you," replied Ijapa. "I am too full in my belly to carry any food with me." And so Ihoro's mother let down the rope, and the rabbit and the tortoise descended back into the forest and went their separate ways home. When Ijapa got home, his family were still sleeping, so he crept into his bed, covered himself up with his blanket, and fell into a deep sleep for 12 hours. When he eventually awoke, Ijapa was very hungry. "I need food," he thought to himself. "I need food, and I need it now." It was then that Ijapa had an idea. "I will go back to Ihoro's house while he is still at work. I will think of some lies to tell his mother when she lets down the rope, and I will fill my belly once again." When Ijapa arrived at the open space in the forest, he cleared his throat and began to sing the same song that Ihoro had sung the previous night. "Aya, Aya Tekuan Whale O," chorus, "Alu Jan Jan Ki Jan." "Aya, Aya Tekuan Whale O," chorus, "Alu Jan Jan Ki Jan." The trouble was, Ijapa had a rather husky voice, and the song did not sound as beautiful or as heartfelt as when it was sung by Ihoro. "That does not sound like my son," thought Ihoro's mother. The old rabbit hesitated for a moment, but eventually she decided to let down the rope. "Perhaps he has caught a cold," she thought, as she lowered the rope into the clearing below. The mischievous tortoise was delighted to see the rope fall to the ground, and he quickly grabbed it with both hands and began to climb as fast as he could. Ijapa was halfway up the rope when he heard a voice shouting from the forest below. "Hey, where do you think you're going? Come back down at once." It was Ihoro, and he sounded very angry. "Mother, we've been tricked," shouted the rabbit. Still Ijapa continued to climb the rope, his mind full of thoughts of the feast awaiting him above. Ihoro called out to his mother again, but again nothing happened. And so the tortoise continued to climb up the rope into the clouds. Ihoro cleared his throat, took a very deep breath, and began to sing to his mother up in the clouds. "Aya, Aya Tekuan Whale O," chorus, "Alu Jan Jan Ki Jan." "Aya, Aya Tekuan Whale O," chorus, "Alu Jan Jan Ki Jan." When Ihoro's mother heard her son's voice, she exclaimed, "Now that is my son." But who was the first caller? The old rabbit peeped through the clouds to see what was happening below. That was when she saw the tortoise climbing up the rope towards her. "Mother," shouted Ahuro from far below, "Cut the rope." The old rabbit fetched a large carving knife and began to cut at the rope. At first it seemed as if the rope was made of iron and that the knife would have no effect at all. But Ahuro's mother continued to hack at the rope with all her might, and soon there was only a very thin strand left for the tortoise to hang on to. Then the old rabbit gave the rope a final hack with the knife, and Havuawa. Ijapa went tumbling down towards the forest below. The winds carried Ijapa back and forth, tossing him around in the sky until he landed heavily on his back in the forest. Unfortunately for him, the only thing to cushion his fall was a big rock that was sitting on the forest floor. When he landed on the rock, Ijapa's shell cracked in so many places that it ended up looking like a jigsaw puzzle. The tortoise awoke many hours later. He was very dazed, but he was able to move and found that he was not in very much pain after all. But his shell remained like a jigsaw puzzle and would never again return to the lovely, smooth, round shape it was before.